and maybe with the revision we can somewhat strengthen them and clarify them. This first set, having a destination strategy, a destination management organization.
You've been pre-assigned to this group, but if you feel passionate about another section, you're welcome to move tables and move about. We'll give you a few minutes at the end of this part. So that's what that means, and as we're going through this, if you think about, well, I'd rather be in B or D, then that's the exchange you can make in this.
So the next section is about what is currently titled Maximising Economic Benefits to the Community and Minimising Negative Benefits. I think it really should be called Socioeconomic, because actually quite a lot of the content of the criteria are more about social benefit as much as economic benefit. And you'll see the individual criteria there. It's about monitoring the economic impact of tourism visitor spending, amount of employment and so on, local career opportunities, public participation, gauging local community opinion, which I think is becoming more and more important in this whole world of concerns about over-tourism and so on, local access, awareness, local community awareness and education about tourism, preventing economic and social sexual exploitation and so on, supporting the community through support for community initiatives, and supporting local entrepreneurs and fair trade. The third one also has the word communities in it, and this is some of the stuff I think that needs to be slightly clarified and sorted out, because this is more really about cultural impacts. That follows also the industry criteria, where the section C is all about culture. So this is about attraction protection. That's really essentially about protecting cultural heritage sites, visitor management, visitor behaviour in sensitive sites, cultural heritage protection. That will include non-site specific, intangible cultural heritage, site interpretation, and intellectual property rights. And then the final one is the environmental section, and all those headings I think are fairly self-explanatory about wildlife, energy, water, solid waste, light and noise, transportation, protection of sensitive environments. So that's just to remind you basically of the statement we have here.
So, time to work, put those magnificent minds together at each table. Before we get started on the individual table work, we have a couple of general discussion items that we thought we'd raise to the group at large and just get some feedback. First of all, do you have any questions about the revision process, what we're adhering to, the ICL code of conduct that we're adhering to, or anything about access to the revision process? Please don't be shy.
Are the survey responses public or not? In other words, can other people see your survey answers and you can comment on them?
Yes and no, in the sense that they are public, but they won't be ascribed to the individual. Other than, this is a little bit of a detail, GSTC is going out to one or two organisations, very particularly about some areas of the criteria that they are especially involved with. So there's a special approach to WWF, for example, in relation to some of the environmental things, and to ECPAT about certain aspects of exploitation. And their responses will be made known in the second round consultation. So it's a yes or no.
Yeah, just a comment on a term you used, Richard. You spoke about reformulation of the criteria. I would like to think that this is not to be the process. I mean, we do expect also the base of the revision of hotels and tour operators that rather than reformulations, we're expecting rather small adjustment and changes. We're not a process of reformulating. We're a process of revising the ideas based on the experience of application of the criteria. So without, of course, preempting any process, my guess, my expectation will be that it's rather some adjustment, some addition, but that the core of the criteria is going to be similar to the one that it is now. I just wanted to make that point.
This is a really, really important point,
Yeah.
and I was going to say that, so thank you, Luigi. If I did use the word reformulation, that's not a good word, so let me drop that one out. This is amendment where necessary, and it's absolutely, because there's a lot of people are already using this standard, and we don't want to throw it all out and start again. So it's the art of what's strictly necessary rather than what's nice to have. So do think about it. We really need to change this. So thank you very much.
And I will say, on the previous round, on the industry criteria, what we found is that there were some new terms that have emerged that we felt would bring the criteria more into the current lexicon that everyone's using. So it was a lot of maybe wordsmithing, and in some places there might be a complex idea where the complex idea was broken out to make sure that it was clear what each idea actually meant or referenced.
Over-tourism will probably appear, right?
It might
wasn't
appear.
there before.
Over-tourism might appear.
There is another aspect, and I hope this is not to be confused with reformulation or anything, but the Destination Working Group had a meeting earlier this week, and the issue of presentation and basically saleability of these criteria came up, because there's 41 of them. And if you look at some of those titles, there's some very obvious overlap. And the discussion was, and we need to agree on this, to look at not reformulating the content, but reorganizing it so that it's much simpler to get across as maybe, sorry, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. The idea was to see if it could be reorganized, and this would have to be done as a draft, and then everybody comment on it, maybe decide it's a horrible idea. But if it could be regrouped into something like 6 to 8 criteria with the existing criteria sort of subsections of them. For instance, you'll see 3 or 4 about public participation. That can become one criteria. Same indicators, same subsections, but a much easier thing to present. And this comes from me as an editor, because as an editor, this is a nightmare. And we want more and more people to adopt this. So that's different from the content criteria. This is just, the way you categorize it and organize it. That's
Look forward to that submission.
I do agree with you absolutely, Johnson, that there is a lot of overlap and unclarity in there. It's confusing in places. I think we have to have a balance between the point that Luigi made about, we want it to be pretty recognizable with the existing criteria, but your point is well made. So yeah, we will be very keen to receive those sorts of comments.
Another point which may or may not be important. The destination criteria don't follow the same sequence as the industry criteria. I don't know whether that makes a difference or not, but I did a little side-by-side analysis, and it tends to make it even more confusing if you're looking at both sets. But in most cases, if you don't need to look at both sets, it's a non-issue. I just want to raise that as well.
Any other questions or comments at this juncture? If not, we'll keep rolling. We have very little time. The other idea that that's I think of one of the greatest values of us getting together today, is looking at alternatives for outreach and ideas surrounding that. Just brainstorming some ideas with the groups that you work with, people that may or may not be on the internet on a regular basis, may not have access to the communication streams from the GSTC. We'd love to hear any ideas in that regard, and we'd like to open it up for idea generation. And if you have other ideas as we're going forward, you can certainly contact Richard or myself, and we can bring those to the group as well.
I would say that if there is at all a chance of finding a sponsor for having a meeting. I mean, all my experience in this as well is that when you have a group of 15, 20 people in a room for 1 or 2 days, the end result of the brainstorming is much better than 100 people working from their computer at home, because that interaction is completely missing. So if at all there is a possibility, we need to have a sponsor. But if some of the companies or members would be interested in that, my suggestion would be to have a 2 days brainstorming workshop, somehow along the line of your calendar. And I'm sure from other processes I've been participating on that is likely to give very good results.
Thank you. Any other ideas?
One of the reasons why we asked this question is that the ICIL standard needs us to be able to demonstrate that we have made an attempt to have access to people who may not be connected to the internet and so on. We thought that we would possibly, for example, here in Africa, make sure that we were communicating with some of the existing certification bodies like Ecotourism Kenya and so on, to say, you know, we would like you within Kenya to talk to your members and maybe them to their stakeholder groups and so on, to kind of get some feedback through you. It's quite difficult to know how to access some of the more isolated stakeholders. Sorry.
Have you thought about reaching out to non-members who might be valuable to get on board, who maybe find out why they aren't signing up, maybe find out what the obstructions to do that is? And I'm also thinking, especially for, I mean, in Africa where most of the businesses are small, but in Europe a lot of the businesses are part of a chain or an affiliation already, and they have a large reach. Maybe it's worth talking to some of them, because small changes in large companies can make a big difference.
Great. And we don't just go to members, but we do have quite a list from the initial consultation in 2012 or 2011. So we do go beyond just GSTC members, but thank you for that suggestion. That's great. And if you can think of any networks that you're affiliated, I mean, there's no bars held on this one. We'd like to get it out as broadly and widely as possible. So even if there's a sector that you think is indirectly related that could have some valuable feedback, we'd be interested in it. Okay. Well, now it's your fun. We have exactly a half hour that we're going to take for this exercise. We'll see how things go, and if you feel like we can wrap it up a little bit earlier, we'll go ahead and do that. So at this juncture, before you move, we just want to explain your task. Now, your task, again, is not to go through the entire document. That would be impossible. But we would like you to focus in on the criteria that you may be assigned at your table or you're able to move. And we'd like you to identify some of the key issues. If you glance through it, you go, wow, you know, something that's really not addressed that seems to be in my world, in my context, write that down. There's no wrong answers for this. And then as you develop that conversation, hopefully you'll generate a few other ideas surrounding the criteria, the content, the emphasis, where the emphasis might be. So it's our hope that you're doing sort of a mile-high view of the criteria and brainstorming some ideas around your segment. You have a piece of paper on your table to write down these ideas, so we wouldn't need to assign a scribe at each table. You also have some markers, which looks like somebody's chewing gum attached. Don't get rid of it. These are little clay pieces, so we can actually put your results up on the wall for all to see. So, and then at the end, what we'd like to do, if we hopefully will have a little bit of time for this, is to really understand your top 2 priorities based on what you've generated. So as a group, you're going to have to come together and say, yeah, let's put these 2 forward. Are there any questions? Would anyone like to move at this juncture? If so, you've got a minute to change seats.
Participating as a participant, or is it your bonus?
Any comment is welcome.
This is a simple change. So one first is that we have to add
Sorry. I was testing on the design, which criteria we believe instead of passing all of that starting to there are 15 quite long. Maybe does not have to start.
there is an amount of overlapping. Yeah, but this is again it's quite different. The right side of this is maximized through and dance because the title as it is now, we were here talking materials about the waste management. So in a way there is not the data, but the title of this should be just otherwise we have overlapping. So when you see the overlapping between A and B, and this is for attraction sites. These are very specific. But this is general to the destination. Yeah, but this we was decided now we the way it's set up now. I see it as a social and economic. Those are together in my views. Visitor management for attractions. All this has to do with culture and science. Exactly, on the local residents to emphasize the impact, right? Yeah, but now it's not in the But it's what the over-tourism has more to do with the support line. It has to do with the carrying capacity, with the perception, with the market participation. So, yeah, but for example, all the criteria, you have to make a choice. So, tourism, as it was said in the Paris list, is the models. These are the ones that okay, but this is another point. But I think the section C is the type, but if you look at all the criteria have to do with culture. There is nothing on social, nothing on social issues there, nor economic issues.
I mean, that's where the definition
Because it says about sensitive sites, look, sensitive sites. We're talking about culture. Because look, then the local government is trade historical the criteria are looking at what is not going to be the task. But the old criteria are stated. Time to write, then it falls into the but this is no, I mean in A is about the line.
Are you video sound recording? These? Okay, because we're wondering if you should.
Now, my question to you is, do you see any major gap? You are doing do you see any gap? Which is something so local as a concept now without the wording when it belongs to a something yeah, but this is again has to do with overlap. My question is, do you see something that is missing as a whole? Yeah, see, but is saving because we were talking natural gas, I wanted to see, right? But then you have the element of, for example, consumer price.
That's okay. That's all right.
So that,
Quality requirements.
let's say the
Yeah,
local
that's what we're at.
rest outside. Let's say you have a big hotel, and you can start over there, conceptually is different.
That's fine.
Honestly, I don't find it.
All right, everyone, super smart people, this is the hour, and what we'd like to do is, hello, we're kind of out of time crunch, sorry. Sounds like awesome discussions, and even if you put down, hello everybody, come on back, sounds like you've had tremendous, valuable discussions. Even if you only put down, some people put down quite a few ideas, but even if you only put down one idea, I think the discussions have been quite fruitful, so thank you for that. What we'd like to do now is Richard is going to lead us through, we want your top 2 ideas. If you only have one, that's okay, but your best ideas we'd like you to share with the group. We will compile all these ideas and they will be posted somewhere. We're not quite clear exactly where, but we'd like to record your thoughts and we will take those into consideration as we move forward as well. So Richard, that said, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Kelly. I think what Kelly didn't say is that she's also going to be herself thinking of what are the 2 or 3 key points to present to our final session. And just so you don't get worried, the whole timetable is running 15 minutes on, so we've got until 5:15 here, and then we'll go straight into the final session of the conference across the way at 5:15. Oh yeah, Kenny wants you to. What do you want?
You've got little sticky chewing gum. I didn't chew it, but that's on your marker, so you can bring your. You can put it right across the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, don't feel you have to stick it on the wall if you don't want to. Alright. Okay. Leave the chewing gum for somebody else. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to go section by section, believe it or not. We're going to start again with section A, and I'd like are you section A here?
B.
Section A, table 1. One or two key points from you guys, please, starting now.
Should we have a microphone?
In general, we feel we could reduce the list a little bit because we feel there are some redundancies. It's a general approach. Maybe we could bring some criteria as sub-points into others to shorten it down from 14. Then we go into the details.
Pick one or two.
One could be that A1 and A2. A1 is the strategy, the overall strategy, and A2 means we need to have a DMO. But it's not said that the strategy has to be elaborated at least together with the DMO. It could be done by whomever, and I think this is fundamental.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. Very good indeed. Can we have?
Let's give him a hand.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you very much. Can we have a second A table, please?
We did it just as we wished to have it merged the list, we merged the tables. So that's a good example. So you're already in B and we save time.
Right, in which case, guys, I'm going to say anybody from the other tables who wanted to add anything about this, maybe we'll just take the slide back to A, to this overall management section. I know you've been talking about culture and environment and so on, but does anybody want to make any points about management, please?
We face this issue on tour operator and hotel criteria, and it's also, I see here, it's in A1 written implementing a multi-year destination strategy. And so I would like to see what does mean multi-year, 3, 5, 10, 15, 25, and so on.
Are you saying you think it ought to specify
yes.
what we think might be
yes.
ideal?
Because it's important, I think.
Thank you very much for that. Anybody got any others? That's a great point. Any other points on any of those topics that you haven't been discussing?
For me, with the climate change adaptation, I know that there is something that talks about that all the, let's say, tourists, all the stakeholders have to keep track of their, but we're missing a system whereby all this can be put together and recorded, and in a comparable way. And I think this is a big task ahead for the tourist sector as a whole. So maybe we could start with our criteria, if not possible to do it 100% now, but to have that concept that a destination should be able to report on the greenhouse of that destination in a comparable way. That could be the seed then of having maybe that spreading around, because now we know tourists generated X greenhouse gas emission in 2005, and no one knows how much has been generated in the next 13 years. So where we are now, are we improving? Are we not improving?
Right.
There is not such a system, so I believe it is a task we will have to deal with.
Great, thank you very much indeed.
Is there a word we're thinking from that adaptation? Should we want to change our adaptation?
Well, the question was, should it not be climate change adaptation and mitigation?
Yeah.
I don't quite know why it's set up like it is, but the mitigation aspects actually come under section D, where it's talking about carbon and so on. So, and A, I think the thinking was, I have to tell you, I didn't write these criteria, but I think the thinking here was that in the overall management of a destination, yeah, you have to face the fact that climate change is something you need your destination to adapt to. And that's why it's kind of been put under the overall management umbrella there. And the issue about trying to reduce the carbon footprint of tourism activity within the destination, i.e. the mitigation, is coming up the environmental one. But it's typical of this issue of where the things go in this structure, which is we're all struggling with. I can just move us on very quickly. I want to go on to B, C, and D. There's one more.
Sorry, it's just a quick one. If these criteria were done prior to the SDGs, is it worth including them in the new criteria?
It's certainly worth looking at them very closely in this whole process. And I would encourage anybody who, when you're giving your individual more detailed responses, want to make a reference to back up a point you might be making to something in the SDGs. That would be great. So we have to have SDGs in our mind the whole time. Thank you for the very good point.
Just to add, we discussed this climate change topic as well, that it could be change transferred into D. I think we should have here mainly topics and criteria that really can be influenced from the DMOs and the stakeholders. And otherwise, if we have climate change, for example, here, we could add many other things. Let's say depopulation of rural areas, for example. That is at least as important as these and many others, depending on the places. And a city, for example, a huge city, climate change in London, the DMO in London should tackle climate change as a DMO with the tourism partners. I doubt if this is the right industry. So that's why I feel, or maybe others feel it's not section A.
Thank you very much indeed.
I do want to move on to B, but I will just take one more from you.
Different opinions.
Well, just along that with climate change, it could be linked into.
You're on.
Sorry, it could be linked into tourism seasonality and other places rather than being its own.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is really, really helpful. Let's move on to a table B. Have we got a table B? What about this table here? Who wants to feedback?
Okay, so we had quite in-depth discussions and we only got up to, where did we get? 4, the local community opinion. So under B1, we just had a question whether leakage should be included, which is economic monitoring. And then we wanted to call it socio-economic monitoring with specific KPIs. And
I'm just going to stop you. This is great. It's quite detailed.
Oh, yes.
Are you going to give us that detail on all of them?
No.
If you were, can I ask you to pick something particular you like out of that list?
There's only 2 more.
Okay, fine.
But particularly on this point, I think without a plan, you can't monitor. And without identifying your impacts and risks, you can't develop a plan. So I notice on the environmental section, we've got identify risks, environmental risks, but we haven't got identify economic and social risks. So there would be that process of which the monitoring would be at the end.
Okay.
And then in terms of knowing whether climate change is relevant or not, once you've identified your risks and your impacts, then you know where that's going to fit in your management plan and your mitigations and your monitoring.
Great, that's very, very helpful. I'm sorry I interrupted. Do go on. Give us one more.
So B2 was local career opportunities. We just wanted to add career development planning to encourage the advancement and empowerment of local people in those destinations. Okay, then what's this one? Oh yeah, then overall, it would be good to restructure it so that it's sort of in a correct order of the way to follow it. And
Thank you. I think that's great, and it's good that you're kind of thinking planning in a systematic process in a lot of those comments. Thank you for that. Are you table B?
Yeah.
You're B. Do you want to add a couple of points?
Yeah. One is about titles. Very simple. Very simple suggestion. Maximize economic and social benefits. I don't understand why it's not there, because then all the criteria talk about social. And to clarify B, I have to make a suggestion on C as well, as we discussed before, because in C there is again the same concept of benefiting local community, but there should, since the C has to do with culture, is benefiting local community through enhancement of culture. That element is missing in the title and create a lot of confusion in interpreting the criteria. I think you got the point I want to make, right? Through enhancement of culture, because otherwise it's repetitive.
Yeah.
Now, on more substantive issues, we suggest to add the over-tourism element in this section, because it has to do mostly with the impact on the local community. I think this is where it belongs. I think we cannot avoid mentioning now, because it's been identified with unsustainable tourism, and we believe that this is the place where it belongs. Then we have some suggestion of merging and overlapping, but I don't think it needs to be addressed now here. We can give the paper to you. And
I think the key point is that recommendation that the over-tourism issue, whether we use that phraseology or not, I'm not sure, but this is the point for it. And I think that's really helpful. That's one of the reasons why we need to do this revision.
Because you don't really see here.
Yeah.
I mean, you see other elements of the empowerment, but you don't see the element of reaction of local community toward too fast or negative tourist development.
Super, thank you very much. Anybody from the rest of the room got anything you want to say about that list? Okay, I'm going to move. Oh, do we have one? All right.
On B, we thought B6 particularly, instead of it just being regular programs for affected communities, instead of the communities having just a passive voice, they should be engaged. So we thought it could be edited so that the communities have a contribution to what's going on.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's really, really important that the communities are fully engaged at the beginning. Conscious of time, I'm going to move straight on to C. Do we have a representative?
Yeah, I think the very first thing that jumped out at us when we looked at it was the heading. As has already been mentioned, Section B and Section C are very similar, and I think one would need to relook Section C perhaps along the lines of protection and promotion of cultural and heritage sites would be more appropriate, seeing as Section B dealt with the community already. And I think first and foremost then would be, number one, to have a development plan for the development and protection of your heritage sites. The other aspect that we discussed here was, we talk of visitor management and visitor behavior, but one would also need to look at creating visitor awareness. I think number one, first and foremost, is it's important for a visitor to understand the area that they're in, the community that they are visiting, the cultural and historical significance of the areas before we start looking at how we get to manage them and how they get to behave in those areas.
Thank you very much indeed. Again, it's really helpful to have these rather logical and sort of systematic approaches that we're taking here. Any other table C? We did have another table C, I think, did we? Yeah, done here.
Thank you. On C, we thought specifically C3, it shouldn't just be visitor behavior at sensitive site. It should be general visitor behavior, looking at that they have to be conscious of where they are at all times. It can't just be at selected sites. And then the sensitive sites also, it's sort of vague what those sensitive sites are. So it doesn't say where you are that we call sensitive. So we thought we could edit it to say culturally, spiritually, environmentally, that sort of thing. So that people are aware what we mean when we say sensitive sites.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that's absolutely indicative of where the world's moved on. The visitor management is about everywhere. It's not just about certain particular sites. Visitor behavior in that regard as well.
I just had a comment. It's with the over-tourism piece, I've always had it somewhat in my mind that it would link with C2, which is visitor management, and having a system to monitor that and to use that feedback to manage for over-tourism.
Thank you. I mean, again, that's interesting because, I mean, it relates to visitor behavior and things that are in C, but it also relates to social impact on the community. So it could be both, essentially. Thank you very much. Anybody else got any points on C? Let's move on to D, as we've only got 2 or 3 minutes left. So can we have a table D feedback behind you there, Glenn?
Yes, our group shared what Jonathan mentioned earlier about simplification of this section and how it should be grouped. Certainly one of them revolved around D5 and D12 merging with D4 because they all relate to each other in many ways, but also introducing the concept of obviously measuring renewable energy options as opposed to always just focusing on fossil fuel discussions, and also introducing the concept of innovation. How are we measuring the destination's pursuit of innovation when we talk about the establishment of renewable resources and energies? Other areas of focus was there's no discussion about oceanic ecosystems, and obviously it's become more and more prevalent with the Great Barrier Reef and other areas that we would like to see that included. And under D2, it talks about the protection of the sensitive ecosystem, but it doesn't actually talk about the rehabilitation of those areas that may already be destroyed. It only talks about let's prevent destruction, but it doesn't talk about rehabilitation. So we would like to see that added in. We also feel there could be an easily streamlined for D6, D7, D8, all in their underwater management. There's just no question about that. The discussion about D10 is just to remove the word solid. It just should be just waste reduction. And so we're on the right track then at this rate. Well, that's great. We would like to see the introduction of preventing erosion as also discussed when we talk about ecosystem management. And the final one is under D3, under wildlife protection. It references the sale of wildlife. In our view, it should be, because it's an international law, that you can't sell wildlife. It shouldn't even be referenced in here because it's acknowledging it's possible. And that's what we feel it should be stricken from the whole thing.
That's fantastic, thank you. That's some very, very important and detailed points there actually. So that's really rich, thank you very much. Moving on to another D very quickly.
Okay, so we named our group, we're Super D. We just felt we needed to do that. Overall, I'd say we felt that a lot of the criteria were good the way they are, and then we would want to dive deeper into the indicators at some point. But we agree quite a bit with Glenn. For D6, We actually felt that D7, D8, D9 could, so moving wastewater also into that and incorporating it all into water management, and we included a little bit of text that might help with that. We also had a similar kind of concern or question about D4, greenhouse gas emissions. We thought perhaps maybe it could be just integrated into D5, D6, D10, and D12, because as Glenn mentioned, he talked about more of the energy and the low impact, but D10 actually is greenhouse gas as well, so we want to make sure, and we thought maybe it could be something more like provide guidelines and educate on climate change, but then that took us back to A with climate adaptation. So we were just trying to figure out how maybe to either remove it or remove it and integrate, or update it with some different wording was the biggest part there. And I would actually go back one more time to that D10. You talked about solid or waste reduction. I would encourage materials management. That is what that realm is really going towards, and not calling it waste. So materials management would be one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much. It was encouraging that you said that actually a lot of them are pretty much okay. Quite a lot of this discussion has been about better wording, better ordering, and so on, as well as adding some key points. So thank you, that's very well illustrated. Can we have the final section of the table, D, please?
Thanks. We were looking more on a Botswana-centric kind of approach. So we agree with all of your, both with Glenn and yours. We'd just like to mention that for greenhouse gas emissions, which is D4, we would like some guidelines on a standardization process, because there's so many different ways of measuring what do you include, what don't you include. So if you're going to ask people to do their greenhouse gas emissions, suggest some guidelines, even if they're very broad. Because I don't know if any of you tried to do an audit yourselves. Do you include your kilometers, how far you fly? It's very confusing for a first-time user. And I assume that these are all first-time users that you're going to apply this to. And then we agreed with the waste management. But we would prefer to have some guidelines on in-country. Because here in Botswana, all of our recycling is done in South Africa. So maybe there's some guidelines which can stipulate in-country solutions, and then a designated organization that's not necessarily government, to try and devolve power and influence away from government, which is what you guys are already doing on a large scale. And then I think under your risks, there's no mention of ecosystem services. How do you value the ecosystem that you're busy monitoring the impacts on? Because that's a different way of viewing it. How much is the value of the water you're getting from your catchment areas that you are mitigating for? Does that make sense? Ecosystem servicing is very important in your protected area management, for example, and the impact that developments have on protected areas. So that's something to consider. Thanks.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. I'm conscious of time again. Some really knowledgeable points there. That's great to hear. Finally, anybody else from around the room got any points about D, meeting?
Yeah, related to energy, water, and solid waste reduction, we only require enterprises, to do, but I think enterprise include the community too. And then we have an expression like the decision has a system to encourage blah blah, but when you measure, really audit, what's the encouragement? So it's not really clear. So we may need a different expression.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Something a little bit tighter in monitoring. Now, I'm very conscious that we've run out of time. I think we could go on. Let me finally say, please go into that survey and, fill in your specific points there. We have recorded your comments, and we will also take your sheets away. So that's been a very, very rich contribution, and it's the beginning of this, and you've kicked it off brilliantly, so thank you.
Give yourself